Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Breaking Barriers Now. I am your host, Jody Watkins. And today, my guest is the other half of Dr. Meg Longyear. We have Dr. Mike Longyear. And I'm really grateful for both of you for coming on the show and giving us a little bit of a backstory of the barriers that you both have had to break. Your story is very interesting from what I've been able to see so far. Looks like you got very injured in high school and out of that somehow found your purpose in life. So I'm interested to hear that backstory and, just how you enjoy helping others today. So I'm going to let you take it from here. So welcome and thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you for having me. I am honored to be a part of this. And I know Meg said she had a blast with you guys too when she did this last couple weeks ago now, I guess. But
yeah, she was awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of share my story. So I got started in healthcare for the same reason I think a lot of people do. We have kind of a personal experience. I often say this, like with chiropractic, I feel kind of like we get called to it more than we wake up one morning and decide that's what we want to be. And my story definitely led me down that trail. So you kind of alluded to the injury that I had when I was in high school. When I was a sophomore in high school, I had a football injury that left me paralyzed. And when I first got to the hospital, they told me that I would never walk again and basically started teaching me how to use my wheelchair and all of that fun stuff. But as a result of some hard work and I think some luck with who that I got placed with, I was able to kind of overcome that. And that put me, like you said, on my passion. To give even, go a little deeper, I was going out to catch a pass playing football, and I was a wide receiver / tight end. And I was going to catch the ball like this, and I kind of got twisted down. And as I was getting hit, I knew that there was some pain there. It felt a little weird when I was laying on the ground, but I popped back up, finished the game. I actually had one of my best games as a high school player. I scored a couple touchdowns, and I did really well, finished the game out. And went to school the next day and everything. This was JV, sophomore year. So I ended up back in school on Friday. And then I had some tightness in my chest and some difficulty breathing Friday night, ended up in the hospital. And they diagnosed me with an out of place rib and a pulled muscle, sent me home with some muscle relaxers and said, "You're good to go." And so I got home and my legs were a little heavy walking up the stairs to get into the house. And we called the hospital. They said, "That's just the muscle relaxers." And then I laid down on the couch, fell asleep watching TV. My mom just kind of left me there. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up with a little bit of pressure, like I had to go to the bathroom. So I kind of woke up sort of and tried to swing my legs off the couch, and nothing happened. And so that kind of shocked me awake, thinking I'm having a nightmare, and tried again and couldn't sit up all the way, and I couldn't swing my legs off the couch. So I screamed so loud that my neighbor, who was getting ready to go fishing or go to work, I forget what Mr. Worm was doing, actually heard me, and he was standing next to me about the same time my mom came from downstairs to check on me and everything. So the rest of it's honestly, it's kind of a blur. I remember them getting there. I remember them trying to get me off the couch the first time. And sorry, I'm getting a little choked up telling this. It's been a minute.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
And I remember them trying to get me on the gurney at first, and I couldn't because all my muscles like spasmed really, really tight. And then the next thing I remember is being in the hospital. They did 8 hours worth of MRIs and CTs, had no idea what was wrong with me. Finally, I came from a small town, Manistee, Michigan, and so they bussed me an hour north in an ambulance. And the first doctor that I met, so they had no idea what was going on with me at home, right, at the home hospital. The first doctor that I met there met me in between the ambulance and the front doors with a black magic marker and a safety pin. And he started poking me and he said, "Tell me when it gets sharp." And I said, "Ouch," when he got to right about here, right about the nipple line. And he drew a black across my chest. And he said, "He's got a lesion at C7. Like this dude, 8 hours with doctors at the other hospital. And this dude with a safety pin and a black magic marker figured out what was. But that's kind of where his brilliance ends in my story, at least how I saw it. And so he diagnosed me originally with a spinal stroke. And I said, a lot of blurs and kind of fits and starts of how I remember things. The
Right.
next thing I remember is him walking in my room and grabbed my chart off the end of the bed and said, "You had a spinal stroke and you're never going to walk again." Set the chart on the end of the bed and turned around and walked out of my room.
Oh my goodness. Let me stop you for a second if you don't mind,
Yeah.
because this is huge and there's a lot of kids out there, that get injured and stuff like that. And that's kind of where my passion is right now too. So let's talk a little bit about the mindset. I mean, you were 15, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't even imagine being told something like that. Like, do you remember what your thought was at that moment?
Nothing good.
Nothing good. Yeah.
I mean, it was devastating. I think the next thought was, how do I get somebody up here to bring me a gun? You know,
Mm.
going from playing football and being very athletic and very kind of all over the place all the time to being told you're done. Like that was, in my opinion, my life was over. So it might
Wow.
as well be, right?
Yeah. But it
And
wasn't, and you proved it, right? So talk a little bit about, how you kind of got through that moment. Because I have conversations all the time with parents. And I have a 13-year-old. And when you play sports, injuries are part of it, right? So let's just talk about, how did you get past that moment of, I don't want to be here anymore?
yeah, I think family was huge in it, having my mom and my dad. My dad lived 4 hours south of us and he
Mm.
was there the next day, just called work and said, "I'll come in when I can." And yeah, having them there was a big piece of it. The outpouring of support from my friends and football team and all of that was a big piece of it too.
Yeah.
I remember I have a little brother, younger brother. He's not little, he's bigger than I am, but younger than I am since we were about that age too.
Yeah.
It's like he can't come to the hospital. Like he can't see me like this, So
Mm.
he was the only person that I didn't want at the hospital, but all of my friends came up. Again, we were an hour north, but they all kind of caravanned up, and the football team, football coaches, everybody. That support was huge.
Wow.
Um, and just the way that I was raised from my mom and my dad is you don't give up. You just, if something's put in front of you, it's not something that happened to you, it's something that happened for you. Figure out what to learn from it, get over it, and get past it, right?
Yeah.
So I watched my mom break through glass ceilings. I always joke that, if you want my mom to do something, tell her she can't. And that was what I
Sounds like
saw.
she and I would get along really well.
I loved her for sure. She, you know, that's how I was raised, right? That's what I
Yeah.
watched. So I think that was a big piece of it too. And they stuck me with an intern in the physical therapy department. They literally, because they're like, yeah, you just got to learn how to use your wheelchair. You're never going to walk. They literally did not prescribe any physical therapy for me
Wow.
except for wheelchair training, right? They had, and this is where, and I work with a lot of patients now, a lot of athletes and stuff that have had bad injuries. And this is where you really have to fight for yourself. And where my family really was huge in this too is, they were basically going to stick me in a corner and show me how to use a wheelchair. I had to fight for them teaching me how to walk again.
Mm.
Because it's like, here's your diagnosis. And for those people that don't know, a spinal stroke, you don't walk after a spinal stroke. So if that
Mm.
was the diagnosis, they were right with what they did. Well, I should say you're not supposed to walk with a spinal stroke. I think that it can happen now with what I know, but
Right.
they stuck me with an intern, and she was, I don't know, dumb enough or awesome enough to say, they had this walker, this like blue walker that was in the corner of the room, and it was basically like a hydraulic. You put your arms on it and they can pump you up out of the chair. And I told her, I'm like, I'm walking out of here. I'm not wheeling out of here. So the wheelchair stuff is crap. Like, I'm not doing that. You can either help
Mm.
me or you can find someone else. And so she's like, I'll make you a deal. If you can take 3 tiles, if you can walk 3 tiles with the blue walker, then we'll do a little bit each day on strengthening your legs and seeing if we can get your toes to move and your legs to move. Because I had nothing. So I literally dragged my feet for 3 tiles, and she held up her end of the bargain. So, thankfully for her getting those things going. But, I think it was a combination, having family around, having people support you, tell you you can do it.
Yeah.
I remember some dark times, and, and they needed to pick me up in those for sure.
Yeah. So what could be some maybe encouragement for a kid that gets injured that maybe doesn't have all that support? What do you think you might tell them?
Is that, doctors don't know everything. As well read, and I study constantly, right? I'm always reading research, and Dr. Meg makes fun of me.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit.
Opposites, right? She's the feely one. She's like, I don't
Yeah.
really know how it works. I'll just feel how it works. And she shocks me. She comes up with some stuff on patients. I'm like, how did you know that? Like, I didn't even talk to you about that part. And she's like, I had a feeling. And
Yeah.
so she's with that. I'm the other
Yeah.
side of that, the left brain, and I need to know things. But as much as we study, as much as we feel, as much as all of that, we don't know everything.
Right.
And a diagnosis it's just a suggestion. It's just our best guess at the end of the day. And any patient knows their body better than we do.
Mhm.
So trust your body, trust yourself, focus. There's all sorts of, we can get into the weird stuff with some of Dispenza's stuff and manifesting and
We
rebuilding your
talked
body.
about, I said, I asked her if she read books by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and she completely was like, oh, you and Mike are going to get along great. Because I'm kind of both sides. I'm kind of like the empath side, like she is, but I'm also a big researcher. And I love quantum physics and reading up on that stuff. And so that's what it was funny when she was saying that.
Yeah, so and that's the best thing to tell a patient is, what we're starting to understand through the quantum universe, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, if you will, is that we really don't know what the body's capable of and what it can regenerate and rebuild from. Your mind has the ability to create out of thin air.
Yes.
And if you follow Dispenza, you know that he basically recreated the lattice for his spinal cord, not spinal cord, but spinal bones
Mhm.
by meditating and rebuilding that.
Yeah.
My focus when I was in the hospital, I didn't know any of that stuff when I'm 15, but my focus was just on walking. Every time I sleep, I saw myself getting out of the bed. I saw myself playing football again. Like it was never not an option to do those things again.
Yeah.
And I think when you have that piece really brings a strong part to the story.
Definitely. And I know you can't see it, but right behind me, it says it starts with the mind. And even, I mean, in everything that we do, it's interesting. And I didn't learn this until later on in life, but it really does. And what you just said when you were envisioning those things, right? I didn't learn about these things until a few years ago, but it's so true. When we have a vision and we continue to vision about these things and have these dreams, that can really come true. But we have to believe that it can come true. So that's why it does start with the mind. And our mind can really propel us in places we never even thought we could go. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. And so that prefrontal cortex, like if you're ever here in the office, people hear me harp on the frontal lobe the most.
Mm-hmm.
Part that separates us from the animals, right? When you can, and the prefrontal cortex is the boss. It's what we vision with, right? So it's something that connects us to something bigger than ourselves. It controls all of the processes that happen in our body. 90% of the brain is inhibitory or controlling, and most of that comes from that prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
So it will inhibit inflammation, it'll inhibit negative things from happening, but it can also inhibit good things, right? If
Yeah.
you're starting to believe that this is it, then it is, right? I love
Mm-hmm.
the whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right.
That's true.
That's it in my life. In that, if you whatever you believe, whatever you focus on, that's what you're going to draw to you. And that comes from and starts with the prefrontal cortex, the mind, and how we start and how we attach to the world in that way.
Yeah, that is so true. I talk a lot about self-sabotage because I was in that. And I went through trauma therapy a couple of years ago, and that helped me kind of get past a lot of the things that I didn't even realize were there. And so it is very true that we have to understand that whatever we're thinking is true. And just like you said, whether we believe we can or we can't, we're right. That's a huge quote. And I know that from firsthand now. And it's actually something that I mentor other people on, because I'm like, what do you believe? And what do you say to yourself? And, would you say to someone else what you say to yourself? Like things like that. And it's because I had to go through that. And so let's talk about, you went through that, and then you had this intern that challenged you, right? And so you stepped up to the challenge. So how did that propel you to, starting the Brain Optimization Institute and what you do now?
There's a lot of stories in between that.
Yeah, I'm sure. In under 30 minutes. I always say that. Like, tell the whole story. No, I'm just playing.
The hard part. Well, it's her challenging me, but more than that, when I did it, she lived up to her end of the bargain too, right? She kind of went against what they were telling her she was supposed to be doing,
Right.
even as an intern, right? And she took that chance on me and had that belief in me and worked with me. And then once the paralyzed kid in the corner who wasn't supposed to walk starts moving his legs and standing up, now everybody wants to work with me.
Mm,
So I think every physical therapist worked with me. I used to have 3 or 4 of them at a time to get me through the parallel bars when I first started to rewalk and things like that.
wow.
So, then seeing everybody turn and almost rally around my story and help me even more and push me even more was a big part of it.
Mm,
Um, but then, and some of the darker side to it was they missed a lot of things in my healthcare too. Like I sat in a hospital for 8 hours where they could have been decreasing the inflammation that was going on my spinal cord. And I could have not had some of the long lasting effects that I still have now.
yeah.
Right. So, and that made my mom mad and my stepdad mad and my dad mad. So then watching them kind of try to start a litigation process and get mad about that, but knowing that the doctors, they just didn't know. They just were not well read and they didn't understand. It
Right.
wasn't necessarily malicious. I don't think any doctor becomes a doctor because they want to screw some 15-year-old
Right.
over.
Right.
It just wasn't in their tools. So
Yeah.
knowing that, and that's where I really started to realize that there had to be something else. They looked at me at the hospital and said he's got a pulled muscle and an out of place rib and sent me home with a muscle relaxer and a pain med. We have to do better, right? Even at
Definitely.
15, I started to realize that. So that ignited my passion. And, at first I wanted to just be an athletic trainer. I went to school at University of Detroit and I went to school just for athletic training because all I wanted to do was work with athletes. And I've been blessed to work with some amazing ones over the years. And I wanted to work with athletes that to make sure that didn't get missed, right?
Right.
Like I wanted to be right there on the sideline. I see something like that. Okay, here's what we got to do. So that I think it was fueled by making sure nobody else went through what I went through in the beginning. And then, over time going to chiropractic school and working through some of those things, then I just started to, because I'll tell the piece about how the adjustment kind of changed my life here in a second, but I didn't realize there was another way to look at health and well-being other than the model that I had gone through,
Right.
right? Even when I went to athletic training school, I didn't realize how much different the chiropractor was than what I was doing until, I'm an athletic trainer. And for the most part, all we did was give people ibuprofen and put tape
Yep.
on it. And I didn't realize that was what was going on until I finally, talked to my chiropractor and his wife, who was a physical therapist, and said, I got to do more. Which one do I go do? Because both saved my
Mm,
life. Right. Physical therapy got me up out of the hospital and allowed me to walk again a month after they told me I would never walk again.
mm,
Right. Physical therapists were huge, but I still had a lot of lingering issues and lingering problems. And it was about a year later. So I went to a chiropractor to get adjusted. And I just went because my friends were going that were on the football team and my brother was going and it was his buddy's dad.
mm,
And I had I didn't have, even though I was walking, I didn't have any sensation from my nipple line down,
mm.
like pain temperature. So I couldn't feel hot and cold unless
Wow.
it was extreme. And I couldn't feel pain. Like for instance, if I would stub my toe, it wouldn't hurt. But when I tried to step on my toe or on my foot, it would just collapse. So my brain was getting signals, they just weren't getting through and being interpreted. So my brain would know that I hurt something, but I couldn't feel it, but it didn't want me to use that limb. So I just couldn't walk for 5 or 10 minutes after stubbing a toe. So
How long did
that
that last?
that was for a year until
Okay. Wow.
which time I went and I got adjusted. So I went to
Okay.
this doctor where all my friends were, and I went home that night. He was an old school chiropractor. So he like picked me up and shook me out and like everything kind of thing. Um, and it was awesome. And I still love doing that to people and having that
Yeah.
done. But I went home and I took a shower that night and I put my foot in the tub and I was like, oh shit, that's too hot. And I was like, wait a
Wow.
minute, oh shit, that's too hot. Like I could feel
I can
that.
feel
And
it. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
it's mind blowing. And so got in the shower and I started like literally my body's kind of tingling as the hot water's hitting it because I hadn't felt that in a while. And I went to him and talked to him the next day. And again, I'm 16 years old at this point, and he told me something about the power that made the body heals the body. It went right over my head. I didn't care. I had feeling again,
Right.
which sucked because I made a lot of money and free beers off my friends because I could hold a lighter to my leg longer than anybody else could, and I could stink in the bonfire longer than anybody else could because I couldn't feel the pain. Right. So that part was negative. Positive was I had my feeling back. Yeah, that lasted for about a year until, and that's what I mean by how chiropractic changed my life. But I didn't know what the principles were of it until finally getting to school and and learning about how there was a different way to look at health and well-being than what I'd been doing as an athletic trainer and what I'd been doing, we'll call it Western medicine or allopathic medicine.
Right.
Not that that isn't necessary and it isn't needed. It was an eye-opening revelation for me looking at health and wellness in a different way, the way that we do kind of from a holistic perspective now.
Yeah. Isn't that
So that's
interesting
how,
how your experiences, because I think your wife and I talked about it a little bit. Like I had an experience where I was a caregiver for my mom for a couple of years, and the doctors just were not doing what they needed to be doing. And I had to really dive in. And so that's where my kind of research and getting into more of a specialty in nutrition and things like that kind of started. And it's interesting to me, and this is why I love this podcast, because everybody has a story. And I love that even though the injury was very traumatic, and at 15, I mean, I can't even imagine. I played basketball, so I mean, I can't even imagine being paralyzed, what that would have felt like. But the fact that you were able to get through that and just continue that journey is huge. And I love that you noticed, because I went to school for athletic training as well, and I love that you noticed the difference, because it's completely different when you go into these other fields.
yeah, it's just a different skill set, right? I don't think
Yeah.
anybody, again, it's not malicious. It's just their toolbox.
Yeah.
And it's just, and that's what I love about where I think our society is right now is people are kind of waking up to the fact that maybe there is a different way. The doctor used to be king. If they had a white coat, they might as well have had a crown on because if they told
Hmm.
you did it under the punishment of death, right? Is how I
Right.
think a lot look at it. And I still see, my parents and their generation looks at it a little bit that way. But
Hmm.
my generation, our generation, it's more of a healthcare team.
Yeah.
And the doctor is just telling you what their opinion is and what we're able to do and how we're able to spin that, right? But I tell my patients all the time, I'm just part of your team. You're also part of your team. And anybody else that we want or need as part of this team as well.
Right.
So, I think that's where you see that shift in healthcare now that maybe there is another way than taking a pill or cutting it off or, digging around inside of you to fix it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's been encouraging with working with patients here now too. So,
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget. I share this all the time. I had a pediatric doctor, pediatrician for my daughter back when she was 7. She got diagnosed with ADHD, and I started doing research because the medications, she wasn't taking them very well. It's hurting her stomach, and she was playing sports, and that just wasn't working out very well for her. And I started doing the research, and I with my mom, she had multiple sclerosis as well. So I studied protein for brain health. And so later on, with my daughter, I was like, well, there's got to be something here too. But it was interesting to me. And that's when it kind of slapped me in the face that doctors didn't have all the tools. Because when I presented the information and the research to the pediatrician, because of course I wanted her to sign off on it, she said, well, Jody, you would know more about that than I would. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, we don't learn nutrition. So if you want to go that route, that's on you. And I was like, wow.
at
Wow.
least,
She
I commend
was.
you for saying that because a lot of doctors, their response is that won't work.
Right.
And it's just because they don't know whether it can or not.
Yeah.
Uh, it's, but they people are automatically push away anything that they don't understand,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it won't work. It just means they don't necessarily understand it. So
Exactly.
I commend you for saying that.
All right. So you go to the chiropractor and you decide you wanted to go that route. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was years after that actually that I ended up in chiropractic school, because I still went, even after going to the chiropractor, I still went to athletic training because
Mm,
that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with athletes.
right.
Um, Finally kind of made it to chiropractic school, and the story of chiropractic, the bone on a nerve thing didn't make sense to me, because what bone was on what nerve that restored what I had, right? I mean, I know he rattled everything, but it wasn't like the bone on a nerve thing, and the
Mhm,
research now supports that that's not how chiropractic works. But I just started studying everything I could to figure out my story while I was at school. And one of my now good friends and mentors, Michael Hall, was one of my teachers, and he's the one that really turned me on to how the adjustment affects the brain, and then how the brain really controls everything from the top down.
mhm.
And whether it's mind and your thought process, or whether it's just how the brain works and controls the endocrine system and all that stuff, I started to research as much as I could. And my first job out of school, actually as an intern at school, was actually at a brain center where we worked almost exclusively with Navy SEALs
Mm.
with PTS and traumatic brain injuries. And Navy SEALs are a lot like really high level athletes. And
Yes, they
so
are. I have a couple friends who were. Yes.
yeah, training, so their brain just works different. They don't have an off switch.
Nope.
And so that really challenges you as a functional neurologist chiropractor to work on things to really push and drive their brain even more. So my first job as an intern was working with some of the most difficult cases in the world as a fresh out of school kid.
Mm.
And so that really kind of started me down that trail, and then ended up at Life University running their neurology center with the research department there. And again, just being part of the university, we worked with all sorts of athletes. Talking about it all starts with the mind. We had a saying in as an athletic trainer, but then also at Life, that the athlete was good in the leg or the body part way before they were good here. And
Yes.
that's the part that you got to rehab the most. Is the ACL is strong. The ACL healed probably months ago, but it's that mental approach. It's how they feel about it. And that same thing can happen with traumatic brain injuries. I've seen that with, professional athletes to college athletes to high school athletes that we've worked with in the past, is molding that brain, molding that mind, and making that confidence come back is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and a
that's
part that's
hard.
absolutely.
That's how
And
me. That's the hardest part. Right? Like you can heal the body, but healing the mind, and like I said, I know this from personal experience now, that's hard. It's not easy for a lot of people.
Well, and that was the hardest part with me, right? Like I played football again in high school.
Okay.
I realized my sophomore year, I sat out my junior year because I was barely strong enough to lift my own body weight.
Mm,
But I played my senior year. But I remember
wow.
walking into that first practice, and the first time I got hit, I just laid there, didn't think I'd get up again.
Yeah.
Because the last time I felt that's kind of how it ended, right? So
Yeah.
uh, and that lasted a while actually. Every time I'd get hit, I would like wiggle my toes and check and make sure that I was okay. So,
Yeah.
you know, stupid
Oh,
kid at 16, but,
yeah. No,
but
and that is just so true. I mean, I've had a lot of injuries too. And then last year I had two car accidents. And even now, like I was rear-ended. Now, every time I see brake lights, I'm like freaking out. Or when I see somebody kind of speed up behind me, I'm like bracing my neck, right? Because I'm like, I can't take another one, right? Like, and it's crazy how, those, unforeseen things that happen in our lives really do cause, that trauma in our minds where it's like you said, every time you got hit, like, can I still move? Is this, and I've had knee injuries and surgeries and things like that. And it really impacts you on a whole nother level. So how did you get your confidence back?
it was time. Just over time, like it was good more than it wasn't, and then it was good always, and then it was just I stopped thinking about it. Right?
Yeah.
I'll be so there's still little things that catch me. I remember the first thing that really scared the crap out of me. I was lifting, getting ready for football season,
Hmm.
and I was bar squats. So my injury was right at the top of the thoracic
Oof.
spine, at the base of my
Yeah.
neck, and I was doing bar squats, and I felt a little tingly under the bar. And I just my whole team was in there lifting. I quietly put the bar on the ground, on the rack, walked out of the weight room, went all the way downstairs, and just sat there and just every few minutes checked my feet and made sure
Mm,
I could move and do those things. And then when it was okay, I knew what that feeling was.
yeah,
And then first time I got hit, I laid there and made sure my legs still moved. The next time I got hit, I remembered that feeling. And so
yeah,
over time, it was one of those where it just was better. And again, I had a lot of really, coaches were really quiet with me, really patient with me. They gave me my space when I needed it, but they were there to support me and say, "You're good, get up, let's go." So I think a combination of all of that for sure.
yeah. You mentioned bar squats, and I just because I work with, I'm a certified personal trainer too, and so we build workouts for people. I can't put a bar on my back anymore, and I don't put weight on my back anymore because I have a compressed spine and bulging disc and things like that. What is your take on bar squats?
I don't know why you're ever going to need to lift that heavy for anything anyway. I'm a body weight exercise at this point in my life.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think Olympic lifting as a career is phenomenal. Um, and I think it stops there. One thing that I don't think a lot of people understand is there's nothing healthy about being a pro athlete. Whether it's a pro lifter and lifting really heavy weights, or whether it's a pro football player or a pro tennis player, the amount of drive and determination and sheer willpower it takes to do those things actually isn't all that healthy for you.
Hmm.
I've worked with a lot of pro athletes in the past, and I'm like, hey, we're gonna get you better to get back on the field, right? Whether it's soccer or lifting, like with heavy
Right.
lifters, I worked at the gym for a little while, and it was kind of like, I'm gonna get you back to that. And when you're done competing, come back and we'll get you healthy.
Mm,
And is it doesn't take the same like brain balancing, right? If you look at just the way your brain works, the left side of your brain is more about motivation, drive, determination. The right side of the brain stops and smells the roses.
yeah.
Nothing about an athlete wants to stop and smell the roses. So
I still struggle, I promise.
we got to drive you into that right side. So
Yeah.
really unbalanced, just left versus right brain in general.
Yeah.
And I think lifting is kind of that way too. I'm okay if you need to lift heavy weights because you're going to have to push a 300-pound lineman around. But then after you're done pushing a 300-pound lineman, come talk to me and we'll get you healthy. We'll slim you down, take the pressure off the cardiac system, and then really kind of have your body be a well-oiled machine instead of something that's built to be a battering ram or something along
Yeah.
those lines.
I appreciate you saying that. I think it is something that people need to hear more of, especially coming from different voices besides just mine, right? But that is, I mean, I did my first powerlifting meet. I think I was 40, and it felt really great. But right after that, I ended up with another knee injury, and I was just like, okay. And I ended up working with a sports medicine doctor, and he said, Jody, when are you going to stop? And I said, stop what? And he was like, you're just gonna, yeah, and that's exactly what it is. So what I've had to do was shift. And now I don't really have an off button with my mind, but I know with my body, I have to have, even this morning, my body was talking to me and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna listen, right? But it's difficult to get to that. So how do you work with people that are kind of like me, or not necessarily stubborn, but it's really hard to let go of like that mindset when you're so used to just putting it, putting everything you have into something. How do you work with people?
Well, I think, I think having Dr. Meg is a big piece of that actually. And the way that we work together, in our office, we do things differently. I'm the guy, and we kind of joke that she's going to make you cry. She's going to work on your emotions, and then you're going to come play games with me.
She said
Um,
that.
it looks like that's on my side. I'm the guy that pushes, but she's the one that makes you realize it's okay not to.
Right.
So mentally getting around a statement like, I'm okay if I don't drive myself into the ground, or I'm okay if I do take a break, or I do take a rest, and being okay mentally with that. Because, like, if you remember, we said 90% of the frontal lobe is inhibition. That
Right.
go, go, go is not necessarily frontal, it's not necessarily brain health. But strengthening that prefrontal cortex actually then strengthens the ability to say no and to realize where you might need to sit back and relax. Not that you're less than, but that it's different than. And those, I think, are big pieces. So, I always love to have I enjoy having a patient that I got to rein in better than one I got to kick in the butt.
Mm,
same time, some of the most challenging patients are the ones I got to rein in,
Mhm.
because they're the ones that are constantly the type A. They need to go, go, go. They need to get through it. And making them stop and relax is sometimes the hardest piece.
It is. Yeah. And I work with some business owners sometimes with the mindset thing and I've had to do it too, where it's learning how to stop and take a break. And, I end up teaching people how to set a timer. So they stand up every hour, right? And go walk around and breathe. And it's interesting how difficult that can be for a lot of us. Like I said, I went through it too. So I love what you said about that. Before, I know we're kind of pressed for time today, so I want to make sure that we get this in, because you have a book and it's called Never Accept Your New Normal. So let's talk a little bit about your book and, just tell people what kind of made you write it and where they can get it.
Yeah, I think my limbic brain made me write it, if I'm being honest. It was one of those things. I never set out to write a book. To be honest, I never talked about my story ever to anyone.
Mm,
Megan and I were married, and she knew that I was injured, but she never knew like the story. And then one morning we were living in Atlanta. It was like between 4 and 5 a.m. I woke up and I was just sobbing. Tears were coming, and just like images of being in the hospital and some of the things that I went through were just kind of popping in my head.
mm,
Only thing to get them to stop was I grabbed my phone and I literally just started writing down what was popping in my head and what I was feeling.
yeah,
And before I knew it, I had 10,000 words. And I started then I transferred it out of my notes off of my phone and transferred it onto my computer, copy and pasted it into Word, and realized that, as I was reading through some of it kind of therapeutically, I was like, this might actually help somebody.
yeah,
Uh, and I was working in that neuro center in Atlanta, and we were working with all sorts of supposedly hopeless cases, people that came to me. And that's where the title comes from. Is I'd have patients walk in with literally grocery bags of medical records, and they said, this is my doctor said this is as good as I'm going to get. He told me to accept my new normal. Can you do anything?
mm,
And so that kind of became my mantra: is don't accept your new normal. You can look at me. My new normal is supposed to be in a wheelchair.
all
And
right,
so that is motivation with my patients. And then when the book literally crawled itself out of me, or clawed its way out of me, through tears one morning,
yeah,
I realized that I needed to put it together. And then, I was fortunate enough to work with some amazing cases over my lifetime, people that had as much drive and determination as me, and got through some things that they weren't supposed to.
mm,
And I put some of their stories and some of their cases in there as well.
I
Uh,
love it.
just to kind of reiterate more of what I went through. But then, I'm not a one off, right? There's all of these other people out there,
Yeah,
and they didn't accept their new normal, and look at where they're at now. So
yeah,
that's kind of how the book came to be. And then, it's just, yeah, from there, I had
yeah,
support of helping to get it done, and getting it finalized and getting it out there for people.
nice. I know you can get it on Amazon, correct?
You can, yeah,
Yeah,
there's in the, what do they call it, Kindle, that you can read it on the computer there, or you can order hard copies
yeah.
of it as well.
Yeah, and I'll make sure I have that link for everybody once the podcast goes live. So that way, if
Cool.
anybody wants to purchase it, definitely encourage you to go get the book. I want to get it too. I'll have to come get you to sign it.
The other piece to it that I thought was that I had never seen out there in a book, because there's a lot of self-help books and there's a lot of
Mhm,
triumph like that. But one thing that I realized, and I think maybe I didn't realize this as I was going through it, but I definitely realize it now with the families that I work with, is I didn't just go through that. My mom went through that, my dad went through that, my
right.
brother. So, and this was, I think, harder for them than me at this point. I went to them and asked them to write down what their experience was. And so I have my mom's story of what she went through, my
Mm,
dad's of what he went through. And it taught me a lot about my experience and what I went through and how it affected them. And how it, even though a lot of times it felt very isolated and alone, I never was.
yeah. Wow.
I thought that that was a big piece to put in there, and one that obviously still gets me a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, and that's what I tell people is I know that in healing, that's when we're allowed to, we're able to share our story, right? There's a lot, I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, there's a lot of things that I talk about now that I couldn't have talked about even just 2 years ago, without just completely losing it, right? But it is important to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge you because the fact that you're able to tell your story, and I appreciate you for telling it because I know I listen to parents. My daughter's 13. So, there's a lot of parents around me as well. And our kids are athletes, right? So I know that this is going to resonate with someone out there. And I always say, the power of one, even if it just resonates with one person, what can that do? That could save a life. And, so I really do appreciate you opening up and definitely for telling that story. I want to definitely offer, for anybody, I know you guys are based in Jacksonville, Florida, here with where I am. So I'm going to be coming to visit, but how can people, maybe do you guys do anything like virtually, if somebody's not here in Jacksonville, Florida, how does that work?
We do some virtual appointments. We do a lot of what I call intensives. People come in for a week at a time, and we might see them 3 times a day for an hour each visit.
Okay.
That's when I worked at that PTS clinic, that was a model there, and we kind of carried that to Atlanta, and then we do some of that here.
Mhm.
A lot of it is geared towards, we maybe get the ball rolling and do that intense work, but then we find a doc in your area that can help carry on the treatment with you.
Nice.
Um, and if you can't make it to Jacksonville, I'm part of a group called IAFNR, International Association of Functional Neurology and Rehab. I teach a course on neuroscience to chiropractors and physical therapists. So I have a network of people all over the country that I can probably find someone that can do some similar things to help people as well. So yeah, if you have a question or you have an issue that you're really struggling and you need to break that barrier to get through it, reach out to us and I can either get you here or find someone that's close to them.
Yeah. I love how you put that shameless plug in, break that barrier. Yeah. Thanks.
I love it. I wish I would have come up with that one first. That's awesome.
It it came to me just we talk about the vision, right? And I started thinking about all the barriers that I've had to break, and I started telling my story a little bit more, and the more I thought about it, I was like, wow, I have a voice and I'm learning how to use my voice now, but what happens when we have other people use their voice? How many more people can we help? And so I'm grateful the podcast actually hit 80 countries last year. I had no idea until the end of the year. I know. And I got this thing and I was like, oh my goodness. So, it's that power that we have when we share our stories that can do so much. So again, I really do appreciate you coming on. I'll be sure to share your links and everything to where people can contact you and get in touch with you, both of you. And just for anybody out there listening that might be encountering something similar to what you encountered. And like I said, maybe they don't have the support that you had. What would you think that next step should be for them if they've been told, hey, this is what your life is going to be? What's their next step?
My next step is literally write never accept your new normal on your window or on
I
your
love
mirror.
it. I love it.
Take a wet erase marker on a whatever mirror or window you look at on a regular basis and put it on there and just don't and fight and keep fighting and clawing because and again to beat the horse, we don't know everything as doctors, so or anybody else in their field. There's always another option, so
Yeah.
keep your head open, your mind open, and those options will often present themselves.
Yeah. And I got chills when you said that. Yeah, that's true. Thank you again so much. You mentioned that you work with veterans as well, military. So I'm a Air Force veteran and I'm actually working with a nonprofit right now that helps veterans. And so that PTSD thing, it's real. And I know that too. So it's good to have another resource in my arsenal to help other people. So now I know that, if it gets to a point where I can't help but so much, I know I can send them to you guys. So that's a good thing. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you following your purpose and finding your purpose through your trauma. It's interesting how that can work. I talk about that a lot too. Like, yeah, there was a time where I would say, why did I go through all this? And now I'm like, oh, I get it now. It's for the greater good, right? So thank you again for taking the time out. I really do appreciate you. Can't wait to meet you in person. and take a tour because you guys are right down the street from me.
Yeah, we got some cool toys. As an Air Force person, you'll probably love some of the stuff we got back here.
Yeah, I'm
Got
sure.
trainer.
I'm sure. All right. Well, thank you again. Again, this has been another episode of Breaking Barriers Now. My name is Jody Watkins. I have Dr. Mike Longyear on here today, and you'll have all the links to get in touch with him, to get his book, and definitely reach out, connect, and don't ever be afraid to ask questions, you guys. Don't, like he said, don't accept what you're told all the time. Sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're not. And if you believe that you can do more, and you believe that you can get up or you can get past whatever you're facing right now, that's what matters. And I promise you, there's somebody out there that will walk that journey with you, no matter what it is. Am I right?
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Have a blessed day, and I will meet you soon. All right. Thank you, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
Definitely, definitely. All right.
Yeah, anytime you want to come over and check the place out, let me know.
Yeah, I do.
We'll
I was telling her I'm gonna stop this recording real quick.